Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in today's edition of Google's African Entrepreneurship Speaker Series. Hustle Academy brings you. My name is Sharon Mashira, and I'm super excited to be moderating this conversation with a wonderful female entrepreneur. And I'll take this moment to invite her to the stage. Her name is Patricia Okelo. Patricia, come through. Hi. Welcome. Have a seat.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Patricia, it's such a pleasure to meet you today.
Thank you. And the pleasure is mine as well.
Being a woman in business, being an entrepreneur, 22 years, that's quite, the legacy, right? Take me back to the beginning. What inspired you to get on that path?
I consider myself an accidental entrepreneur.
Okay.
I studied fine art and had gone into the media space of media because I had majored in graphic design and joined one of the largest media houses here in Nairobi. And I thought that was going to be my life, going into media, going into advertising, and that's the creative life I was going to live. But the year I joined this media house was the same year that my husband proposed to me. And it became apparent that I will be required to move to another town because he was not living in Nairobi at the time. And fortunately, his family is an entrepreneurial family. And my mother-in-law encouraged me and my father-in-law encouraged me to think of business as an option, because I had been doing my own thing, graphic design, you kind of create things, you're selling things for years, And so they were like, you can do that on your own. You don't have to work for someone for that to happen. So I can say that's the thing that pushed me into entrepreneurship and eventually starting Willart Productions, which is the first business that I ran. And I didn't give it a lot of thought. Yeah,
it just accidental entrepreneur. I like that. I think I might borrow that one day. And tell me, when you were thinking about setting up your business and setting it up for growth, I'm guessing as an accidental entrepreneur, those are not things that were.
No.
So how did you manage to, sort of scale it to where it is today?
That's interesting. And I think the jury's still out when you talk about scaling.
Uh-huh.
But when I started the business, I was the designer, the driver, the marketer, and, the delivery guy. And as the business grew, I just started filling in those little spots, because you become too busy to be able to do all those things. So of course you begin to hire. I remember my first employee, I had to train her to do design work as well as do all the other things that she needed to do in the office when I wasn't there. And slowly by slowly, you just begin to grow the team. So the core team was really around the studio. And then I had, I think, 3 designers and then started building, because I'm not very good with finances, it's not in my background, I hired my first real hire after the designers would be an accountant. Wow. So the business just grew organically over the years. Of course, at our largest, we were about 22, 23 employees. And then, of course, the ebbs and flows of life, sometimes you have to scale down, sometimes you grow the team, yeah.
And, you've touched on something really important, which is finances or financing. So how did you finance your business or access finance? I think that's always an important, point to discuss,
Yeah, it is. I was really fortunate. I remember the first time, the first computer I owned, my husband and son who took a SACCO loan. That time, personal computers were really expensive. So that was like the first big thing. So he was maybe the first investor, if you want to say. And then the business really grew organically. So we were, all the money that came in, we kept putting it back into the business. Yeah. So I remember it took me almost 3 or 4 years to start paying myself. So the advice that we hear is, as an entrepreneur, always pay yourself first. Well, I clearly didn't read that book. So the only thing that I kept dreaming, the thing kept me up at night would be, can I pay my salaries for the little team that I had? So really, we kept plowing back everything that we earned back into the business. And I didn't need to look for external financing outside of family until I wanted to invest in my first machine. At that time, digital printing was becoming all the rave, and we could, large printing machines could now be owned by individuals. So I think for me, the first investment was around printing for branded items, and then eventually going into digital large format printing, and that was financed by a bank. Yeah. And that's a story in itself, but it was financed by a bank, and that's when I really now went out to look for external funding.
Right. Yeah. And I realized maybe we've not really explained in detail what you do, what your business is. So do you mind just letting us know what Conferencing in a Box is, or Willart Productions.
Yes. So I'll talk about Willart first. So Willart was just an offshoot of my own skill set, which is graphic design, offering graphic design services. At that time, a lot of large organizations were going into basically were not only using agencies, because agencies you have to use you have to pay retainers, etc. That was the tradition at that time. So what I came into the market saying is that you can get this great services, but you can just pay as you go, right? And so that's what we brought into the market as a kind of like a new thing, and would go out and start looking for business from corporates to just give a designer the job, and then produce the work hopefully and deliver. Initially, I actually only thought that the only thing I'd be required to do was do design work and then either deliver it on a floppy drive or a CD.
Floppy
That's
drive.
it. Yeah. That tells my age. And then I started realizing that people don't invest money when it comes to just design. You have to kind of like give them something physical. And so I started venturing back into, print. And when I went into print is when the opportunities to buy equipment then came to the fore. So I would do the design work of maybe pamphlets, brochures. Those days we used to print everything, posters, etc. And then started doing a back integration into the business and seeing how can I retain more of the money that I was paying out to suppliers. And that's how the whole idea came of investing in digital equipment. Conference in a Box didn't come until 12 years later into running Willart. And that really came as a result of literally looking at your numbers and sitting with a finance person and saying, hey, look, Pat, if you invest more time in this area, because it looks like this product is a profitable product, how about if you invest more time in this events and corporate events business, and we'll probably see your business grow much faster. At the time, I needed a completely different skill set, because I was working more with the creatives and what we call below the line advertising. While for the conference and events, because we would be dealing with corporates, we needed a different level of human resource for that. So I had to separate the two brands, and that's how really Conferencing in a Box was birthed. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think because you're running two businesses in somewhat different verticals, I'd love for you to talk to us about what you think are some of the mistakes you made as an entrepreneur and how you could potentially correct them, with hindsight.
For me, I really struggle with the word mistakes because, and maybe that's just being an eternal optimist and looking at it more as lessons. And because I was starting my business when I was also starting my married life, which means young children are coming, giving birth to young children, then I felt that the growth of the business had to kind of like be, I don't want to call it stunted, but certainly had to hold back on growth simply because I wanted to be a present wife and I wanted to be a present mother, but I also wanted to run a really good business. So keeping my business small at that time made sense to me. Of course, now in hindsight, and especially 12 years later and running Conference in a Box, I realized that there are other things that I could have done, including getting maybe a co-founder or, those kind of things were not available at the time, or I didn't have those ideas. But of course, those are some of the things I think I would have done sooner, is get a partner, collaborate more with other designers and other like-minded people who were also offering the same services at the time. And I think I would have been able to grow the business much faster had I done that. But yeah, those are some of the lessons.
I like it. And, as an entrepreneur, how do you balance between those sort of big entrepreneurship questions like strategy, scaling versus your sort of day-to-day operational questions? Yeah.
I don't know. I sometimes I wonder about those things because I learned them much later, deep into my business. And I'm thinking, I don't know if it's my creative side, but I just felt that if you have an idea, just bring it to market and learn. People will tell you if it works or not. And I think listening to what customers are saying, listening to what's happening in your industry, for me, if you want to call it strategy, I guess then use that term. But that's what I did. I listened a lot to what was happening around the industry at the time. If I saw products that I had never seen before, I would ask questions. How was this done? How is this produced? Going for trade fairs. I would go to Dubai every beginning of the year. They have a huge graphic expo there. And it just became part of the things that I was doing as a founder to grow and to learn more. I think the idea of strategy really came, I would say, when I started. And I was making strategic decisions, but I didn't know. For example, because I was running a business that that was small and I wanted to keep it small, I didn't pitch to large corporates for work. I realized quickly that if I worked with not-for-profits, they were more interested in relationships than where corporates who are looking at KPIs and things like that. So I quickly realized, okay, I'm not big enough yet for the corporate world, although I had corporate clients when I started my business, but just started scaling down and working with not-for-profits, building relationships. A lot of the people that I worked with at the beginning remain my friends till today. So we really built and invested in relationships. And if that's a strategy, then you can call it that.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until 12 years later now, I had my two daughters, that I then had time that I could spend more time. And probably when I started Conference in a Box, I could spend more time with corporates. Corporate work is really demanding. Yeah. Very, very, a lot of politics, a lot of things that you're fighting in the corporate space. And I could now invest more in that and then look for the right, skill sets for that business. So that's what is distinctly different in my growth strategies for the two businesses. Yeah.
Wow. And what about, digital channels? Could you tell us a little bit about how digital channels and digital tools can help you grow your business, run your business? Have you used some digital tools? And if so, just tell us a little bit about what that's been like for you and for your business.
When we started Willart, we literally, I don't even know if you'll understand this, Sharon.
You said floppy disk, so I'm familiar
we used to
with it.
dial up for internet. I don't know. You have to understand where we're coming from. And we weren't online all the time. If you wanted to go online, you had to dial up and then the emails would be downloaded onto your machine and then you'd respond. And that's just the era. We had fax machines. So people would fax designs to clients and they'd fax it back, etc.
Yeah.
And, but one of the tools that I still think was really, one of the things we did is we would spam people. At that time, it wasn't called spam. It was called marketing. Okay. So we would really spam people. But that's how the first funnel we used to generate, to get customers.
Yeah.
And people would respond to spam, believe it or not.
Wow.
So you would craft a really nice email, a letter, and attach a nice, because we're creatives, we could attach a nice document to it. And then people would then ask you, how did you do that, etc. And that would really, was really how the business grew. So email marketing is still a thing, even till today. In fact, we have higher conversions on email marketing than in any other channel. Of course, as social media became a thing, we jumped onto, I think, the Facebook, but we never thought about Facebook and stuff like that for business. No, we never thought about that. Social media really became a thing, I think, much later when people began to see the link between a customer and selling a product to that person on the other side of it, and less suspicion being treated with it. So I think for me, that's how it really started. So yes, we use a lot of that. And then, of course, having presence, there's now a time for people to see if you were legit. You had to have a website, for example. Of course, search engines were now becoming all the rave. So you now needed to have a website. So the first thing now, I remember when we started Conference in a Box was to build a website, but that wasn't the first thing when we were doing Willart. Website came much later for Willart. But for Conferencing, because we were doing work across borders, the first thing we had to do is to build a website. Right. And from there, and people started looking at credibility using a website. And of course, now when we went into Kayana, which is now what we've been working on the last 3 years, it's everything. Yeah, I mean, those are the channels where we attract all our audiences, how we find female entrepreneurs in the work that we're doing, etc. I mean, that's the only way. That was the first thing we did even before we opened office space. Yeah.
Wow. And, you've talked about social media, digital tools like email marketing. How do you identify the next sort of growth horizon or the next growth opportunity for your business?
One of the things that I've noticed over the 22 years is the foundation remains the same and it's still relational. I work with a lot of young people and I have to almost explain to them what a relationship is. Did you send this information to so-and-so? Yeah. How did you send it? I sent them a text and they haven't responded. Oh, did you ever think of just picking up the phone and calling them? And they're like, okay. So I still feel relationships will still be a thing, right? And I think investing in relationships and we're seeing it even in the events industry. We've been so busy for the past 6-7 months, just one in-person event after the other. And so many customers saying that we don't want virtual meetings. We don't even want hybrid. We'd rather have small, intimate meetings with the real people in the room where we can now begin to make meaningful connections. So I feel that will still remain the same. How we connect may change, but face-to-face interactions will still be a big part of the world we live in, in terms of intimacy and authenticity, etc. But that's not discounting technology, and of course the role technology has done. I call it the great accelerator, because a business that took 12 years to build, with Conference in a Box, for example, we were doing double our turnover within 3 years simply because of technology. So technology, I feel, accelerates growth, but relationships will still be the traditional types of connections. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. And, just on a more sort of futuristic thought, what's your vision for small business owners in Africa?
Wow. I'd say small business is big business. That's my hashtag.
Yeah.
Wherever you find me on LinkedIn, I'm always talking about that, especially for Africa. There's a romanticization that has, if that's a word, that has come around entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
which and the startup world of come up,
Ecosystems.
just come up with your idea and fundraise for it,
And then boom.
and then boom. And for me, I really still feel there's a space for traditional small businesses that can grow, but they're just the traditional style. That acceleration of growth will not be like, the unicorns we're seeing, which is really what 1-2% of ideas. So I feel for Africa, because Africa is so rich in human resources and in a young population, I think we really, really need to encourage a sense of entrepreneurship in all our young people. Especially if you have a skill set. We were just talking earlier about, if you've been given a gift, like, for me, it was graphic design. For somebody else, it may be, film, etc. And putting business skills into the thinking around what you're doing. I was talking to the makeup artist earlier and listening to her story around how she started her business. So the core of business skills, I think, is a big part of what we should be sharing with young people. Just basic understanding your money, understanding marketing and sales, understanding consistency and systems. I think that is something that we should still continue to speak to small businesses about. And that's where the growth is really in the small business. And when I talk small, it's not necessarily turnover, employing, 2 to 5 people in your business, consistently paying them an income. The change that it will make on economies is something I really, really deeply believe in.
Right. And just, to further build on that, and based on that vision, what do you hope, or what do you hope could change, right, to make it more conducive for small businesses to be big business, as you said? Yeah.
I think for me, the big thing and the biggest problem is just doing business across borders in Africa. It is just, we're just laughing with a friend of mine and saying how they were traveling, I think, to Senegal and had to go to Paris and then Paris to Dakar. And that was her cheapest route, and I think that's where now our issues in terms of Africa comes in. Just last mile delivery, for example. You have great products. How do you get them to the person right to the doorstep? I mean, there's so many obstacles that come in. Here in Kenya, we have issues just moving from one county to another, because every county you move your product to, there's a cess or a tax that's taxed on it, and making scaling and growing outside really, really difficult. So if you look at people who are doing last mile delivery, they will tell you the challenges they face, and just anything outside the tier cities becomes very difficult. So I think things like bilateral trade agreements that we're doing with Western countries, we also need to do them within Africa. I think there's the AFTA that I hear people talking about. I haven't experienced it yet, but it's a big thing in terms of trading just within African borders, which is great when you write it and sign it, but what happens when you're practically trying to move a product from Nairobi to Kigali or to Congo or to, Lagos? The obstacles are immense, really. Yeah, and people find it much easier to move to Europe and then bring it back to Africa. Yeah.
Right, which is wild to me.
It's wild, yeah.
Yeah, and, I want us to move the conversation to a little bit more of your niche, which is being a creative entrepreneur in Africa. What unique challenges come from that, world of creative entrepreneurship in Africa,
I think because when I speak 22 years ago, I won't even ask you where you were, Sharon, 22 years ago. But telling a parent that you're going into the creative space was very difficult. What is really nice now is parents and caregivers are seeing children make money from YouTube, for
TikTok,
example. Yeah, exactly. And so I think people, in fact, I think parents are encouraging their children to do much more creative things than just, being in the classroom and, starting to become, a traditional career like doctor, lawyer, etc. I think the catch is the concentration span of young people. And, running a business is boring, believe it or not, because you have to do repetitive work. somebody needs to know when they pick up the call on the other side that they will find Sharon offering the services that she said she was doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're a tattoo artist, whether you're a sculptor, it doesn't matter. Will I find you when I pick up the phone and I want your services? And I think that's for me. All my children, I encourage them to study whatever they want to study. Although at the back of my mind, I'm always like, what is the thing you will do and not grow bored of doing quickly? Every day. And then what is it that you love so much? Like my son loves to build Legos. I mean, he can spend hours, like 5-6 hours doing Legos, but ask him to sit down and read for those 5 hours, forget it.
Not happening.
So you kind of like need something that is somebody's naturally inclined to, and then encourage them. Okay, this is what you really do. How do you do it to a point of excellence, and then ultimately to be able to now then earn a living from your skill?
Yeah, amazing. And even as we conclude, what would be your challenge to the audience listening here and at home from your 22 years doing this? What would be your challenge to our listeners?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm doing now, which we haven't really talked about, is encouraging young entrepreneurs, specifically female entrepreneurs, to kind of like bring their idea to life, so to speak, And I always tell people, if you have this innate idea that's inside you, don't die with it. Just try it, test it, bring it to the market and test it. Don't be sensitive when you get feedback, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't wait for it to be like 100% perfect. 60% ready, bring it to market. The 40% will be filled by the customer. So just be ready to listen to the feedback and to keep building and rebuilding on whatever the product is. Everybody has something that makes them really, truly unique. And the more we see unique ideas coming being birthed, as I say, the better it is for our economies. Yeah.
I love it. So Patricia, as you've said, a few years ago, we didn't have access to as much information or resources. What would be your advice to people in the audience and watching from wherever they're watching this from? How can they tap into, the resources and technology that have been made available for them?
Yeah. I'm such a beneficiary of a lot of free stuff. Yeah. All my skills training in terms of business was an opportunity that was offered. I then applied and then got in. And you'll be amazed at how many people do not apply for whatever reason, they don't apply. And so now I think one of the things that we've really benefited from, especially I'll speak a little bit about Kayana, which is our accelerator for female entrepreneurs. We always have a skills training session for entrepreneurs. And many times our resource people are actually from Google. And one of the big ones was Google Digital Skills Training for Entrepreneurs, where the entrepreneurs are trained on how to take advantage of things like a search engine optimization and stuff like that, and which is really, really effective for their business. And of course, now we've already talked about the University of YouTube, and now, of course, with the Hustle Academy. Things that are really just being specifically designed and created for entrepreneurs, And I think if you become really good in something, because there's so many people who are not going to jump on it, you can actually earn from it, You become an expert in it, and you can actually be paid for the work you're doing. So I mean, those are some of the things I really encourage people to jump on immediately,
Great. So you are a creative, and you mentioned earlier this idea of passion projects.
Yeah.
How do you go about determining whether something is a passion project, just do it for fun as a hobby, or should you monetize it and turn it into a business? Because I think as a multifaceted generation, we find ourselves so good at so many different things, but it's hard to determine what is a viable business and what isn't.
Okay, yeah, and not falling in love with your business.
Right.
So one of the big things is anybody willing to pay you for what you're offering? One of the things we always speak about with entrepreneurs that come into our space is proof of concept. Yeah. So if you're saying that, I'm going to be making these like jams or creams or shea butters, etc., and we're like, have you mixed them? Yeah, I've been mixing them. And have people used them? Yeah, the users say that it's really wonderful and it's great. Did you give them out for free? Yes, I give them out for free as gifts. Has anybody come back to order and reorder from you? So that's like on a really basic level, because at least you'll know if somebody who's, first of all, not your relative, I was asking you to create something. To pay money for something. I think that's already a sign that people are willing to part with their hard-earned money for that. Then the second thing I would also think through when you're talking about a business is, have you found a way to consistently produce that item many times? So when you're producing something to sell, that experience needs to be predictable, right? If somebody likes your cakes, or I have a friend who does fantastic lemon tea cakes, yeah. And when I order from her, I don't want today for the lemony to be lemony, and then tomorrow I can barely taste it. You want that predictability.
Consistency.
Then the consistency. When I present it in front of my guests, the same taste and experience that I have had when I taste the product. So you need to have, when you're creating stuff, you can test. But when you're beginning to sell and people are paying you, it has to be consistent. It has to be a predictable experience. You don't want to board a plane and today the journey is smooth. The other day the pilot didn't show up. It didn't leave on time. It's the same thing with small businesses. That predictability in the user experience is extremely important. As they say, you should reduce as much friction as possible. So those are some of the things that I would definitely advise. Document. Even when you're iterating, even when you're creating new products, consistently document what it is you're doing. I think it's great to produce a product. Let me talk about shea butters. If you produce and you're able to do, let's say, 20 in one mixing, yeah, and they sell out, don't say, okay, I've sold out and that was my goal. No, if you're able to do 40 or 80 in a month, embrace that and learn from that experience, and you'll see, okay, fine, is there a trend, data? What is the data like? Are people buying during certain seasons? Are they buying for themselves to use? So keeping track of the response to your product is also a very key part in building that business. Yeah.
Amazing. And just question on mentorship. How important have mentors been in your 22-year journey as an entrepreneur? And how can young people go about identifying mentors?
Okay. Mentorship is something that comes up a lot with this generation. And for me, it's everything. Having people who have gone before me in whatever journey, be it in growing and scaling your business, be it in leading teams, be it in exposure and experience, it's everything. When I tell my story around my business and how I got into corporates, it was really somebody hand-holding the process of me getting and working and understanding the intricate ways in which the corporates run that really helped me. And some of this experience, you can only have it if somebody's willing to work with you even when you're making mistakes, yeah? Or even being able to ask around, okay, now I've gotten this great order, how do you think I should go about it? That is fantastic. I think mentors are just everything for small and micro businesses. And then my advice to young people when you're looking for mentors is something that somebody taught me a long time ago, is when you're looking or searching for a mentor and you finally do get your opportunity to find one, remember the process is driven by you and not the mentor. The mentor is minding their own business and doing their own thing. You're the one who's come to them to ask them for time. And so you must really be very deliberate in the questions that you ask and the point of assistance that you want. What is it specifically that you found that you want Sharon to do and to help you with? Very, very important for a mentee to understand that process. And many people want to help, but sometimes you feel like your time is not being valued. Yeah, people come in late. We have sessions for one of the mentorship organizations that I run, and young people don't understand the value of having this resource in front of you, coming in late for their meetings, ill-prepared, no questions, and just little things like that don't work. And I'd even say, before you look for a physical mentor, go online and look for somebody online who's already sharing their skills with such abandon and follow them. For me, one of the women that I just absolutely love and admire is Sarah Blakely of Spanx. Yeah, I've never met her, but she shares her entrepreneurial journey so openly, and I even consider her a personal mentor because she shares her experience as a wife, as a mother, and then of running a business. So look for some of those mentors who are already there, who you can learn from, and then before you now come and ask somebody to spend 30, 40 minutes with you. And I think for me and the people I've mentored, the value really comes in when you have somebody who's really invested in learning and growing themselves, and you get such a satisfaction when you meet somebody like that. Yeah.
Amazing. being a female entrepreneur on the continent presents its whole, myriad of challenges that are specific to being a woman entrepreneur. What advice would you have for people in the audiences, women that are in business or are perhaps interested in getting in business?
Start now. Start today. We don't have enough female entrepreneurs out there. Women, we tend to overthink things. Or, in fact, one of the things the word I try to avoid is perfectionism. There's a sense that, I don't know, we have to get all the ducks in a row before we bring something to market. And I'm just like, kill that story. Just, if you have a good idea, as I said, if you have people asking you to do something and you can monetize it, just start with it small. Don't be fearful, because one of the things that I was very, very fearful when I started Willart was the idea of being taken away from my family and away from my husband and away from my children. It was a real thing, and even away from my parents. And I think it shouldn't hold you back. I think the beauty about life is things actually work themselves out. And when that problem arrives, you will find a way to deal with it. So I'm just like, you know what, let's just go ahead. Let's build big businesses. Don't take my advice. Build big businesses. Partner with people as early as possible, because women, we love to do things in groups. And you may not get your first partner may not be great, but there are lessons you'll learn from that partnership that you'll build other partnerships as well. So that's the first thing I'd say. Don't be too worried about not being available especially for your children. The fact that you're conscious of it, that you're conscious of that you want to be present for them, you will be naturally present. Somebody, I remember a counselor telling me that children just want 20 minutes of your undivided time. So if even just committing to 20 minutes every day with your children, undivided attention, no laptop, no phone, etc., you're already being a present parent, and be okay with that. Yeah. If you have we live in Africa, so we generally have a really great support system underneath us. Take advantage of that. The guilt will be with you. You will walk with that guilt. It's just something that will be a part of you, but don't let it hinder you from growing and starting your business. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And, I think on that note, I'd like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you. I'm sure, as of many people, we've all learned so much by this session. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. This has been, Google's African Entrepreneurship Speaker Series called Hustle Academy Brings You. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you very much.